All right, so new fresh file, and I'm just going to create a new composition at with a preset 1920 by 1080, and let's make it 10 seconds or so. 10 seconds. I'll go 30 frames a second. That's all good. So we got our composition. So my example was I'm going to do a book, and we're just going to kind of make it open. It involves the techniques. It involves pre-composing objects, parenting objects, adjusting our anchor points, all things we've talked about before, but that we do with most everything, most every animation in one form or another. So I need some assets here to start with. So I need a book. And so I'm just going to create, and I'm going to do this with compositions, because what it allows me to do is to kind of create a working model that I can then go back and add covers to and that kind of thing. So, and maybe I'll actually start with, maybe I'll draw a shape. Just make it gray. And now let's start with a composition the same size. I think that's the easier way to go. So my main comp, I'm going to create a new composition, and it's going to be 4:3 or 3:4 kind of format, like a book. So if I make it, considering 1080, let's go 900 tall by let's make it 600 wide. Let's see what we got. See if that works. So 900 by 600. These are just going to be elements, but we always want to make sure that our frame rates stay the same between all of our compositions. So we'll say OK. And that looks roughly book size. So that's not a bad thing. I'm going to name this because it's going to become rather important. I'm going to call this back cover. And I'm going to actually drop a solid into it for now. And we'll make it kind of a gray. So the reason I'm just creating a composition for these covers and placing a solid inside of them is so that once I get this done, I can then go back at that point and I can create a cover, or I can create a spine, or whatever I need to, drop it into the composition, and it automatically updates into my final animation. So, working in comps this way is never really a bad thing. So that's the back cover, and I'm just going to duplicate it. If I select that, Command D on my keyboard, make a copy of it, and this will be my front cover. And then I need to make a spine for it to open on. So if it's 900 pixels tall, I'm going to create another composition that's 900 pixels tall by 200 wide, say. Seems reasonable. That looks good. And then again, here I'm going to drop a solid into this for the time being, just a gray solid. All right, so I've got, that's my comp too. All right, so this is my spine. The process I'm going to use here, you can use to create boxes that open up. I mean, I think Tony does a demo creating a whole box, but for my money and the time, I figure all the same principles I use to create this book can be used for a box or any other kind of an object. So, so I've got my back cover, my front cover, my spine, and I'm not really going to put anything inside of this, and pages and whatnot. There's a way I can do all of that, but I'm going to focus on the cover for right now. And so I've got all those. Let's close my spine, my back cover, and let's go back to my comp one. All right, so comp one, then I should name it too. This is my main comp. So let's start with dropping in my back cover. And we're just going to kind of place it, actually we're going to place it a little off center, I think. We'll start off in the center. We'll put it in the middle and then we'll move it around later. So there's my back cover. And I want to make these all 3D objects. So back cover, and then hit my toggle my switches and modes. And remember this very last checkbox on my switches with the little wireframe cube. That's how I turn an object into a 3D object and get all of my get my widget that shows all of my different dimensions or directions. So I'm just going to use a default camera for now. I don't have to actually have a live camera in this scene. So I've got that. I'm just going to go ahead and lay in my, let's put the spine in here and turn that to a 3D object. And then I'll grab my front cover and lay it in here too. I'm going to actually put it over, oops, front cover. I'm actually going to put it over here because I'm going to kind of build the book first and then I'm going to open it. So this is my front cover, my back, and my spine. And they all need to make sure make 3D objects of them all. So there's our first step. And then remember, whenever I turn on any of these 3D switches, I get this new set of tools up here, this orbit, pan, and dolly. So I'm just going to use the orbit, which is also 1 on my keyboard if I want to do the keyboard thing, and just sort of tilt these back so I can kind of see the dimensionality. Let's pull them back across. All right, sort of lay them out like that so I can see what I've got. So the first thing I want to do is my spine needs to be vertical, right? So I've got this, and I'm actually going to rotate it 90 degrees. And let's give ourselves more room to look at what we got. And then, so now we want to move our center points so that we can start to parent things together. So I'm going to set this up so that everything is connected to the back cover. Wherever the back cover goes, everything else is going to go. But I want it to work as such that, you know, when I open a book, the spine rotates out, but the cover also rotates out at the same time. So I want to actually use a process of actually setting up, I'm going to move my center points so that each of these objects rotates on the correct spot whenever I go to animate it. And I also want to parent them together in an appropriate way. So the way I'm going to do it is everywhere my back cover goes, the whole book's going to go. So that's going to be my primary object. I don't have to use the back cover as my primary object. I could use a null object as my primary object and start parenting things to the null, but I'm going to, just to keep it simple, I'm going to parent everything to the back cover. So, so my back cover is this right here, and I'm just going to leave the center point right where it's at. That's a good enough spot for it. But when I come over here to my spine, if I rotate around this a little bit, basically my spine is going to rotate whenever the spine bends, it's going to actually rotate or bend right here where it meets the back cover. So I've got my spine. I'm going to grab my pan behind tool, which moves my anchor point. And I'm going to turn on snapping to make this easy, because if I turn on snapping, when I pull this down, it'll snap right to the very bottom of that object. So that's where I want it to go to. I want to rotate off of that edge. Remember, with my 3D camera too, I've also got the option of looking at different views. So I'm looking at the camera view right now, but if I switch to 2 views, I can see this in a top, sort of in a top view mode now. Yes, in a top view. So here's that back cover. Here's that spine. And I'm just going to grab my selection tool and pull my spine over to the edge of, edge of the cover. And because I've got my snapping on, it kind of snapped right to that line. So just move that a little bit. So those are lined up where they need to be. And then this is actually kind of a good primer to character animation as well, because we use the same technique and the same process whenever we rig up characters. So this spine needs to always follow the back. So I'm going to select the spine here, and I'm going to parent it. Come down here to my parent links, and I want to parent it to the back cover. So now if I grab my back cover and I move it around, the spine goes with it. And I want to do the same thing with my front cover. So I need to determine where it's going to, so it's going to rotate off of this edge right here. Like if I pull this up and kind of bring it over kind of close, now I can see better out here. So I'm going to move it out here. Whenever I put these together, this edge is going to match up with that edge of the spine. So this is where that's going to rotate. So I'm going to grab my pan behind tool again, select that, and slide that right over to the very edge. And because I've got my snapping on, it snaps right to the edge. And now I'm just going to grab this with my selection tool. I'm going to go back to my top view and look here. And I'm just going to pull this over. And slide it up until it snaps. So what I've got is, if I take a look here, I've got my book put together in a bookish kind of a form. It's kind of hard to tell what all is going on because I should have probably done different colors on all the different planes to make them easier to distinguish, but if I zoom in here real quick, I'm just going to double check and make sure that everything looks like it's lined up. And it all looks like it's lined up pretty cleanly. Snapping is really helpful in making sure this stuff all kind of lines up the way we want it to. So, all right, so I've kind of got my book put together, except that I still need to parent. Remember, the front cover is going to go anywhere my spine goes. So I want to parent the front cover to the spine. And what this is going to allow is that, I'm going to go back to the single view here. And, you know what, just so that I can easily see the difference, let's do this real quick. I want to change this to a darker bluish gray, something like that. The back cover there. So now I can kind of start seeing the distinction between each of my different planes a little bit. This is just for building. I'm going to cover all this over anyway. But so now if I select my spine and I rotate it, my front cover goes with it. And if I select my front cover and rotate it, things all kind of move together in a forward kinetic kind of a way. So, and that's basically what I've set up here, is forward kinetics, where basically when one object moves, another object moves as a result. In character animation, the concept is that my arms are connected to my body. So I would adjust all of my center points so that on my upper arm, it's actually at the shoulder, and I would parent that to my body. My forearm, I would actually set my center point to the joint, to the elbow, parent it to the upper arm, so on and so forth. This is the same concept, just in a little simpler kind of a way. So let's undo all of that, and I'm just going to kind of pan back on this a little and kind of get us positioned back where we were before. So let's pull that up. So there's our basic setup for our book. Everybody's kind of parented together the way they should be. And then I want to create something for this to sit on. So let's go ahead and add, I'm just going to add a solid, a new solid. Which will create my background. Actually, let's change that solid color too. Make this stuff easier to see. There we go, let's do that. Okay. And then I need a surface for it to lay on. So I'm just going to actually duplicate the solid that I made, duplicate it, and turn the duplicated one into a 3D object so that, and let's change the color on it, solid settings. There we go. So that's kind of sitting right behind my book, and I'll just then scale this up kind of big. So that's our basic setup. I've got let's name this tabletop, and this is our background. And then we can go on and kind of animate from there and add our different elements. So if I've got all this, why don't we add let's animate this first. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to open it. So I'm going to select my spine, and this is just going to be rotates. So set a keyframe. Let's see, if I rotate this, which one of these? Okay. So all I really need to do is keyframe the orientation, it looks like. And then I'll come forward a second or so. And I'll, rotate this out. Probably roughly 90-ish degrees. I don't want to go too far. Let's see. It's at 270 now, so let's go 360. That opens it up. And then so that rotates, and then I'm going to go back to the very first keyframe, and I'm going to rotate the cover, the front cover, and if I open the rotate on this, what do I have? So that's at 90 now. Just going to set a keyframe for that, and we'll bring that out to 180. So it opens up that way. And is that not? It looks like I'm not really lined up, even though I'll have to check that out. My alignment doesn't look right. So anyway, but whenever this opens, they all kind of move together. So it gives a relatively natural kind of a look. And I really just want to make sure that I ease these. Just do an easy ease on that. Let's take a look and see how that moves. Maybe a little bit slower. Let's grab those and drag those out. Maybe I take both of these. I want to use my speed graph and so that it opens a little quicker but lays back a little softer. So that's a little bit nicer movement. It's kind of bugging me that I'm not putting guts in this, but yeah.
How do you get the speed graph again?
Get the speed graph. This little graph editor right here, you click on. So there's our keyframes, and I click on this little graph editor right here. By default, it'll probably actually show you the value graph, which you could probably use too. I just like using the speed graph better, and if I want to, but I can toggle back and forth between the two if I right click on the graph area itself, and I can change it to value graph if I want. It just gives me different looking wires. So change the speed graph. That's just more of a preference for me. I feel like this shows me better what's happening because it's a little slow on opening, but then it ramps up, it gets really fast, and then it slows down gradually. So visually, I think it's a better representation of what's actually happening in general. All right, so we opened up the book, so that's cool. We could, let's see, I'm gonna, oops, what did I do? I want to dolly out a little bit, pan down. All right, and then maybe I grab the back of my book and real quick, back cover, and I'm just going to rotate this around just a little bit. There. It's a little nicer composition. All right, so our book is basically animated. So let's add a light, because we're working with 3D objects. May as well go the full 9 yards and work with lights. So I'm just gonna, I can either right click down here, new, light, select that. And this is not going, I'm going to use a spotlight, I think. Or a point, I'll use a point light. We'll do that. And I'm going to change the, I want it to be kind of a warm light, so I'm going to change the color of it to something a little on the warm side, the yellowish. And let's see. The rest of it, I'll leave alone. Let's say okay. Go back to my two views. And let's look at, so this is a top. I can kind of pull this away a little bit. Let's look at the, from the left side, see what we got. Okay. By watching where that halo goes, I can kind of tell what's happening with the light. All right. Let's just grab the red one and slide it over here. Blue one and slide it up. And then it probably just needs to be a little brighter. So I can change the radius of it. Let's increase that. And now I've kind of started lighting a little bit. So these objects will cast shadows, but not unless I tell them to. So I'm going to close that, and we're going to leave the light that way for right now. I'm going to select all three of these objects and open it up, close the transform. And I want, so because it's a 3D object now, I've got this material options in here. So if I open that up, right now cast shadows is set to off, and I want to turn that on. So now I'm starting to get some shadows in there. Light transmission will, I didn't want to deselect everything. So light transmission will kind of create sort of a bounce light effect within the object, the material of the object. So bump that up a little bit. I also want these objects to accept shadows, so that's on cast, ambient, diffuse, specular. So the rest of these kind of change the look of the material itself, but because I'm going to be doing some other stuff, I'm not going to worry about that for now. So we've got a light. We're casting some shadows. So let's see what happens. So when we open our book, we're getting kind of an interesting little play of light. Should change, drop my resolution. So that's kind of nice. Usually whenever we set up lights in a 3D kind of a scene, which we'll look at whenever we look at Cinema 4D, the Cinema 4D integration, but usually you won't just set one light because there's ambient light in the room. I mean, there's other stuff going on. You can obviously create a real dramatic effect by keeping a single light and creating kind of harsh shadows. That's all good. But like here, there should probably be some bounce light in different places. So I'm going to incorporate that a little bit too, I think. So let's go ahead and close up these. I've done what I want to there. Let's take a look at my point light again. I think okay. So let's create a second light. So this is going to be I'm going to rename this light. So this is going to be my warm main light. And let's create a new point light. I could probably do an ambient light here just about as easily. Let's try an ambient light instead of doing a point. Ambient light, which I'm going to change the color of it to something kind of cool. Let's do that. Whew. So the ambient light kind of did its job a little too well. Pop it back open and dial this back. Its intensity is kind of high. So I just want a little bit of ambient light kind of bouncing around. I still might want to put a spotlight, a point light in, another point light, but this just kind of starts to fill in shadows just a little bit, something kind of low. Let's do that. And let's see what a new point light gives us. I am going to crank this one up a little bit though. Another point light, I'll run all the way over here. Actually, that looks halfway decent the way it is. So if I play that through, I kind of do a book because it gives me opportunities to do a lot of things, but you can use similar techniques. You know, if you want, you know, cut paper kind of effect popping up from a surface, or letters popping up from a surface, or whatever else, similar techniques will work pretty well. You know, this technique will work pretty well with those kinds of things. So that opens. Let's go back to our cover here real quick. I'm gonna zoom in on this and see what's going on. Let me grab my front cover. See what I got. Oh. Yeah. So I should have paid, I really thought those were lined up whenever I built this. That's unfortunate. Trying to go back and change the position of it though, after I've already set these animations, gives some really unwanted results. So we're just going to leave it alone and live with it for now. Take that around. You know, so now I can kind of come back into these if I want to and put a real cover on it, you know, design a cover of some kind and a spine. Do all those kinds of fun things. I probably actually should have done those before I animated too much, but that's kind of why I put them in compositions, so that I could easily edit those panels and not worry about the rest of the animation. So, and that's just all using a default 3D camera. So if I want to do something a little more dynamic, I could go ahead and let's add a camera. Yeah, let's do the defaults. That's fine. And that becomes the default camera that I'm looking through. So, but I can still use my orbit, pan, and dolly to sort of adjust what I've got. What the heck? Let's see. Oh, okay. So, let's left top. So I could kind of pull that back. So what does this look like through that? Okay. Let's go. Left, let's rotate just a little bit. And then slide it back down. And let's just pull that back. Position. Come up to when that opens, right about there. We'll pull our camera in. Easy ease these. So there, so we can kind of, create some nice kind of 3D movement. Maybe when this opens, maybe there's, I should have planned this out a little better maybe from the beginning, but opens, I actually did one time where I had like a poem that hovered above the book, just kind of cast shadows onto it. It was kind of nice. But I should have put that in before I got quite this far. So, but that's, so now I can maybe again kind of do that. There, nice smooth kind of a movement. This starts to give us, it gives us a nice, 3D kind of a look. So, placement of better surface materials, maybe a wooden table of some kind, create a leather-bound book. The kind of nice thing about 3D is, though, that it's all, it's a little bit of sleight of hand. So there's really no dimensionality to the covers at all. They're just kind of thin, but I can kind of fake that with a good texture, but it all happens so quick that you don't really catch it so much. I could probably actually use, with these compositions, I could probably create an extruded shape to give it some depth using the 3D tools, but I was afraid that would really slow things down too much. The more you use, the 3D aspects of it, the dimensionality, with extrusions and that kind of thing, it really kind of slows things down a bit. So maybe let's take a look and see if I can find a Let's steal this worn leather look. I'll just put it in my downloads for now, so I know where to find it. And yeah, stick with that for now. Go back to After Effects. Grab drag that leather in to my project. What is that? What kind of file? Oh, I can't use that file. Okay. It's fine. Do. That'll work. It'll be a little garish, but put that in there. So now I can just go back into my front cover. Drag that in. So now when I start adding some materials to it, it becomes just a little more dynamic. My back cover, same thing there. Now when I go back over here, but it makes it, that's the reason I do the compositions, because it makes it really simple to kind of start changing out those kinds of things. If I wanted if I wanted a liner in here, I mean, I can add that and parent it to the appropriate panel. Maybe keeping that texture there makes sense, but putting a little liner in there that I could put type on might make sense as well. So, but just kind of trying to build it out with a few things. Maybe granite. We'll grab that. I don't think it's going to be the best image, but this is where my texture library would come in handy. Oh well. Save the image as downloads. pre-compose my tabletop. Open it up. Drop my granite into it. And see what I get when I do that. Kind of big and hokey, but it starts to add a little bit of quality to it, so a better tabletop texture would be good. So, you know, we can get nice effects out of the 3D camera doing that kind of stuff. You know, I've used that to create rotating TV panels. You know, put video on each separate one. Kind of worked out kind of neat. But you know, that's just kind of a quick how to, you know, make something tangible out of using that 3D camera. So, any questions about anything I did there? So, I did, and that's actually just a 3-second animation. So, but I've got other ones of those that I've done too. I do have on my YouTube playlist, I think there's a couple of different books, but I can put this one up on, so that it's up on Brightspace as well, just to refer to, but so many things we can do. The extension of this, though, is actually working with, like I said, After Effects comes bundled with, sorry, not After Effects, Cinema 4D Lite comes bundled with it. So we'll actually look at that one night too. Maybe we'll do that Thursday night, just to sort of see how it all comes together, because since it's all related. It's a little different way of working, but it's kind of nice if it's something you want to dabble in and look at. The light version of Cinema 4D is worth it. So, because it's not a cheap program by itself, the full-blown version. But all right. So